The rain in Seoul didn't wash things clean, it only made the neon lights bleed into the asphalt. Clara Okoye stared out the tinted window of the black sedative, a massive Genesis G90 that felt more like a hearse than a luxury car. The wipers sliced back and forth, a rhythmic metronome counting down the seconds to a mistake she was arguably already making. She adjusted the collar of her chef's coat. It was pristine white, a stark contrast to the dark interior of the car and the darker mood of the man sitting in the front passenger seat. He was a mountain of a man, wearing a suit that cost more than her culinary school tuition, and he hadn't spoken a word since picking her up from the agency. Clara looked down at her hands. They were steady. They were always steady. Whether she was disjointing a rabbit or plating a delicate meringue, her hands never betrayed her. But her heart? That was currently hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. The job description had been vague. High-profile client, immediate start, one night only, triple the standard rate. Triple the rate meant one of two things in this city. The client was eccentric, or the client was dangerous. "We are arriving," the man in the front seat said. His Korean was clipped, formal. He didn't look back. "Remember the rules, Miss Okoye?" Clara took a breath. "No questions, no phones, no names." "Correct." The car turned off the main road, winding up a steep hill into the Hanamdong district, where the houses stopped looking like homes and started looking like fortresses. Gates rose. Security cameras swiveled. The car pulled into a driveway that was essentially a brutalist slab of concrete and glass, illuminated by harsh, minimalist lighting. As Clara stepped out, the air was cold. She reached for her knife bag, her own knives, always her own knives, but a hand intercepted her. A security guard. "We have equipment inside," he said. "A chef doesn't cook with strange steel," Clara said, her voice low but firm. She held his gaze. "You hired me because your head chef collapsed an hour before service. You want the best? Let me use my tools, or take me back to Iriwan." The guard hesitated. He looked at the man from the front seat, who gave a nearly imperceptible nod. The guard stepped back. Clara gripped her bag. Rule number 1 of the kitchen: establish authority immediately. They led her through the house. It was silent, dead silent. No music, no television, no conversation. The floors were marble, the walls adorned with art that looked like violent slashes of red paint on black canvas. It didn't feel like a home. It felt like a mausoleum for the living. They reached the kitchen. It was an industrial masterpiece, stainless steel, copper pots hanging like artillery shells, a walk-in fridge larger than her apartment. But the atmosphere was wrong. The sous chef, 3 of them, were standing rigidly against the wall, eyes downcast. They looked terrified. "You have 2 hours, the handler said. "Dinner is at 8. 1 guest. The menu is set. Do not deviate." Clara tied her apron. "Who is the guest?" "The master of the house." "And the dietary restrictions." The handler paused at the door. He turned, and for the first time Clara saw something like pity in his eyes. "He has no allergies," the man said. "But be warned, if he dislikes it, you will simply be asked to leave. If he hates it, well, just make sure it is perfect." He left. Clara turned to the sous chefs. "Okay, talk to me. What's on the prep list?" The head sous chef, a young man who was trembling slightly, pointed to the counter. "Sea bass, pan-seared, white asparagus puree, truffle oil, nothing spicy, nothing acidic, nothing loud." Clara frowned. "Bland? You want me to cook hospital food for a billionaire?" "He prefers it," the boy whispered, looking at the ceiling as if the house itself was listening. He has a sensitive palate." Clara didn't buy it. But she was a professional. She got to work. For 90 minutes, she moved with the efficiency of a machine. She filleted the fish, her knife gliding through the flesh. She blanched the asparagus. She reduced the sauce. But as she cooked, she felt the weight of the house pressing down on her. The silence was oppressive, but the worst part was the feeling of being watched. At 7:55 p.m., the handler returned. "It is time." Clara plated the dish. It was technically perfect. The skin of the base was crisp glass, the puree was silk, but it had no soul. It was a cold, beautiful lie on a plate. "I will serve it," Clara said. "No," the handler said. "You stay here." "I explain my dishes," Clara insisted. "It's part of the service." Before the handler could argue, a deep voice resonated from the doorway. "Let her." Every spine in the room snapped straight. Clara turned. Standing in the entrance was a man who looked like he had been carved out of the same marble as the floors. He was tall, impeccably dressed in a dark charcoal suit, his shirt unbuttoned at the collar. His hair was swept back, severe, but it was his eyes that stopped her breath. They were abyssal, dark, empty, and exhausted. This was Kang Min-jae. She didn't know the name then, but she felt the power. It radiated off him like heat from an oven. The air in the kitchen seemed to drop 10 degrees. "You are the replacement," he said. His voice was rough, like gravel grinding together. "I am Chef Okoye," Clara said, wiping her hands on a towel. "And yes." He looked her up and down, not with desire, but with a cold, analytical assessment. "You are not Korean." "My food speaks every language," she replied, keeping her chin up. A flicker of something, amusement, annoyance, crossed his face. "Bring the plate." He turned and walked away. Clara followed him. The dining room was a cavernous space with a long table that could seat 20. It was set for one. She placed the plate down in front of him. He didn't look at her. He picked up his fork and knife, cutting a precise square of the fish. He lifted it to his mouth, chewed, and swallowed. Clara waited. He took a sip of water. Then he set the fork down. "Take it away," he said. Clara blinked. "Is something wrong with the temperature? The texture?" "It is dust," he said, staring at the white tablecloth. "It tastes like wet dust." Clara's professional pride flared. "I assure you, sir, that Bass was swimming this morning. The puree is seasoned perfectly to the recipe provided." Min-jae looked up at her. For a second, the mask slipped. She saw a flash of intense, agonizing frustration. "The recipe is not the problem," he said quietly. "The chef is not the problem. The problem is that I am dead." Clara froze. "Excuse me?" He stood up, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. He walked to the window, looking out at the rain. "Get her out," he said to the shadows. Security guards stepped forward from the corners of the room. They grabbed Clara's arms. "Wait," Clara said, struggling. "You can't just throw me out without payment." "Pay her," Min-jae said, not turning around. "Double. Just get her out. I can't stand the smell of her hope. It's nauseating." "The smell of my... what?" Clara shook the guards off. "I don't know who you think you are, but you don't treat people like trash just because you have a bad tongue." The room went deadly still. The guards looked terrified. "You did not yell at Kang Min-jae. You did not speak back to the head of the Cheon-il syndicate." Min-jae turned slowly. He walked toward her, closing the distance until he was towering over her. He smelled of expensive scotch and gunpowder. "A bad tongue?" he whispered. "You didn't taste the food," Clara said, her heart pounding so hard she thought he could hear it. "You ate it, but you didn't taste it. I watched your eyes. There was no dilation, no reaction." "You're not bored, sir. You're broken." Min-jae stared at her. The silence stretched for 10 seconds, 20. Then he laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Broken," he repeated. "Yes." He signaled the guards to release her. "My previous chef," Min-jae said, collapsed from stress. He knew that no matter what he cooked, I would not taste it. 3 years, Chef Okoye. 3 years since I have tasted sweet, salt, sour, or bitter. The doctors call it nerve damage from a neurotoxin. I call it hell. He leaned in closer. So tell me, why should I let you stay? Why shouldn't I just drink my protein shake and send you back to your little life? Clara looked him in the eye. She saw the monster there, but she also saw the man starving to death in a banquet hall. Because, Clara said softly, you haven't tried my Yolof yet. It was a ridiculous thing to say to a Mafia boss, but Clara was desperate, and she was right. Min-jae looked at her for a long moment. Then he turned back to the table. You stay, he said. 1 week. If you can make me feel something, anything, you name your price. If not, he let the sentence hang in the air. If not? Clara asked. Then you will never work in this city again, he said. Now go. I have business. Clara walked back to the kitchen, her legs shaking. She had survived the encounter, but as she looked at the stainless steel counters, she realized the truth. She wasn't just a chef anymore. She was a captive in a glass cage, tasked with performing a miracle for a man who had forgotten how to be human. And the worst part was, she wanted to try. The first 3 days were a lesson in futility. Clara cooked. God, she cooked. She made galbi-jim that fell off the bone. She made French consommé so clear you could read a newspaper through it. She made spicy, soft tofu stew that would make a grown man weep. Min-jae ate it all with the mechanical indifference of a man fueling a car. He would sit at the long table surrounded by files and tablets, taking bites between making phone calls that sounded like death sentences. He never commented. He never complained. He just ate, wiped his mouth, and left. Clara was going crazy. She was staying in a guest wing of the mansion. It was luxurious, but the door locked from the outside at night. For your protection, the handler, whose name she learned was Mr. Choi, had said. Protection from what? She found out on the 4th night. It was 2 a.m. Clara couldn't sleep. The silence of the house was too loud. She was hungry, not for food, but for flavor. She had been tasting the bland, safe food she was forced to prep for Min-jae, and her palate was screaming for home. She slipped out of her room. The guard in the hallway was asleep, or pretending to be. She tiptoed down to the kitchen. She didn't turn on the main lights. The moonlight from the garden was enough. She opened the walk-in fridge and found what she needed: tomatoes, red peppers, onions, habaneros. Min-jae's pantry was surprisingly well stocked with international ingredients, likely from chefs who had tried and failed before her. She found a bag of rice, parboiled. It would do. She began to cook, but this wasn't the clinical, precise cooking she did for the boss. This was muscle memory. This was rhythm. She blended the peppers and onions into a vibrant red slurry. She heated the oil until it shimmered. She threw in the bay leaves and thyme, the smell hitting the air like a punch. Sizzle. The sound was comfort. She poured in the tomato paste, frying it until it turned a deep, dark burgundy. The sourness had to be cooked out. It required patience. She added the rice, stirring it until every grain was coated in the red oil. She covered the pot with foil, trapping the steam. The smell began to drift. It wasn't just food. It was a presence. It was smoky, spicy, rich, and unapologetic. It filled the sterile kitchen, climbing the vents, creeping under the doors. Clara leaned against the counter, closing her eyes, waiting for the rice to steam. What is burning? The voice came from the shadows. Clara jumped, dropping her tasting spoon. Min-jae was standing in the doorway of the kitchen. He was wearing a silk robe, his chest bare. A long, jagged scar ran from his collarbone down to his ribs, the mark of the poison that had ruined him. He looked like a ghost who had been summoned by a séance. It's not burning, Clara said, recovering her breath. It's roasting. There's a difference. Min-jae walked into the room. He didn't look at her. He looked at the pot. He sniffed the air. His brow furrowed. I can smell smoke, he said, sounding confused. I haven't smelled anything in years. Clara's heart skipped a beat. It's the paprika and the scorched rice at the bottom, the sokarat. He moved closer. He looked like a moth drawn to a flame, wary but unable to resist. Open it, he commanded. Clara removed the lid. A cloud of steam billowed up, carrying the essence of West Africa, the heat of the Scotch bonnet, the earthiness of the thyme, the sweetness of the caramelized onions. Minjae closed his eyes. He inhaled deeply. His hand trembled slightly as it gripped the granite counter. "Give me a spoon," he whispered. "It's spicy," Clara warned. "Very spicy. Your stomach isn't used to—" "Give me." She handed him a spoon. He dipped it into the pot, scooping up a mouthful of the red-orange rice. He didn't wait for it to cool. He shoved it into his mouth. Clara watched, holding her breath. Minjae froze. The heat hit him first. It wasn't a taste. It was a physical sensation. It burned his tongue, his throat, his sinuses. Pain. Glorious, sharp, undeniable pain. Then the smoke. It bypassed the damaged nerves on his tongue and went straight to the olfactory bulb in his brain. He dropped the spoon. It clattered loudly on the floor. He gripped the counter with both hands, his knuckles turning white. He gasped, a ragged sound. Tears, actual tears, welled in his eyes. "Sir?" Clara stepped forward, worried she had killed him. "Minjae?" He looked at her. His eyes were wide, the pupils blown. The abyss was gone. In its place was shock. "It hurts," he rasped. "The pepper—" "No," he interrupted, his voice shaking. "It hurts. Like life." He grabbed the pot, dragging it closer. He ate another spoonful, and another. He was eating desperately, messily, like a starving man. He was sweating. The capsaicin was flushing his system, forcing his blood to run faster. "I can taste the smoke," he said, looking at her with a vulnerability that was terrifying. "I remember my mother. She used to burn the barley tea. The smell, it's the same." He stopped eating and looked at her. Really looked at her. "What is this magic?" "It's not magic," Clara said softly, feeling a strange intimacy in the moment. "It's Yolof. It's memories cooked in a pot." Minjae wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. The red oil stained his skin. He looked at the stain, fascinated by the color. "You are not leaving," he said. His voice was no longer a gravelly rasp. It was stronger, clearer. "My contract is for a week," Clara reminded him. "Screw the contract," Minjae said. He walked around the counter, invading her personal space. The heat radiating off him was intense. "You belong to me now." Clara stiffened. "I'm not a possession, Mr. Kang." "No," he said, reaching out to touch a stray curl of her hair. He pulled his hand back before he made contact, as if afraid he might burn her. "You are the cure." He stepped back, his face hardening again, the mask slipping back into place, but not fully. The cracks were there. "From tomorrow you cook only this way. No more French nonsense. Cook with fire. Cook with you." He turned to leave, but stopped at the door. "And Clara?" It was the first time he had used her name. "Yes?" "Lock your door tonight, but not because of me." He disappeared into the darkness. Clara stood in the kitchen, the smell of jollof rice swirling around her. She realized then that she had done something dangerous. She hadn't just woken up his taste buds. She had woken up the man buried beneath the monster. And a man who feels is a man who is vulnerable. Upstairs, in the shadows of the mezzanine, Mr. Choi watched the scene below. He took out his phone and typed a message. "The subject is compromised. The chef is the variable. Initiate Phase 2. 3 weeks passed. The atmosphere in the house shifted. The silence was broken. Now there was the sound of sizzling oil, the rhythmic chopping of knives, and occasionally the low rumble of Minjae's voice talking to Clara in the kitchen. He was changing. The staff noticed it first. He stopped executing guards for minor infractions. He started sleeping more than 3 hours a night. He began to eat dinner in the kitchen, sitting on a stool while Clara prepped, asking questions about Nigeria, about Lagos, about why she used crayfish instead of fish sauce. It adds depth, she had told him, grinding the dried shrimp. It's the bass note. You don't taste it, but you miss it if it's gone. Like loyalty, Min-jae had murmured, staring into his wine glass. Clara was becoming his anchor. She was bold with him. She scolded him when he skipped meals. She forced him to try bitter leaf soup, watching his face contort as the bitterness sparked more nerves back to life. But outside the kitchen, the sharks were circling. The Cheonil syndicate was a beast that fed on fear. A leader who smiled, even rarely, was a leader who looked weak. The coup happened on a Tuesday. It was the night of the reconciliation dinner. The heads of the 5 families were coming to Min-jae's estate to discuss territory disputes. It was a high-tension event. I want you to cook, Min-jae told Clara that morning. He was adjusting his cufflinks, his face grim. Something powerful, something that says, I am still the king. I'll make pepper soup, Clara said. Goat meat, hot enough to make them sweat. It shows dominance. Min-jae smirked, a rare, genuine expression. I like that. The dinner began at 8 p.m. The dining room was filled with smoke and tension. 5 men sat around the table, their bodyguards lining the walls. Min-jae sat at the head, looking regal and dangerous. Clara supervised the service. The bowls of spicy broth were placed in front of the men. Eat, Min-jae commanded. They ate. They sweated. They wiped their foreheads. It was a power move, forcing them to endure the heat. But then, Min-jae took a sip of his own wine. Clara was watching from the service door. She saw his hand freeze. He dropped the glass. It shattered, red wine pooling like blood on the white tablecloth. Min-jae gripped his throat. He gasped, his face turning gray. Poison! One of the lieutenants shouted. Chaos erupted. Guns were drawn. The table was overturned. Clara didn't run. She ran toward him. Min-jae was on the floor convulsing. His eyes were rolling back. He's been dosed, Mr. Choi yelled, pulling his weapon. Nobody leaves! Clara fell to her knees beside Min-jae. She grabbed his face. Min-jae, look at me! He was choking. His airway was closing. It's bitter, he gasped. Almonds, cyanide, or something like it. Clara's mind raced. She needed to dilute it, to slow the absorption. She looked at the table. Milk? No milk? Bread? Too slow? She saw the jar of honey she had used for the glaze on the side dish. Hold him down! Clara screamed at Mr. Choi. She grabbed the jar and a spoon. She forced Min-jae's mouth open. Swallow it, she commanded, pouring the thick, viscous honey into his throat. It will coat the lining. Swallow! Min-jae gagged, but he swallowed. The antidote, Clara yelled at the guards. You carry kits, don't you? Where is the atropine? Mr. Choi hesitated. In that split second, Clara saw it. The hesitation. The look in Choi's eyes. It wasn't panic. It was calculation. He's the one. Min-jae saw it too. Through the haze of pain, the honey coating his throat, his senses were firing on overdrive. The near-death experience had shocked his nervous system into full clarity. He smelled the specific cologne on Choi. He tasted the metallic taint in the wine that Choi had poured. Min-jae's hand shot out. He didn't reach for a weapon. He grabbed Clara's knife, which had fallen from the table. With a roar that sounded like a wounded lion, Min-jae surged up. He didn't look like a dying man. He looked like a demon. He drove the knife into Mr. Choi's thigh. Choi screamed and dropped his gun. You! Min-jae rasped, his voice dripping with venom. It was you 3 years ago, and it is you tonight. The room went silent. The other bosses watched, terrified. Min-jae stood up, swaying. He pulled the knife out of Choi's leg. Get him out of my sight, Min-jae ordered the loyal guards. Take him to the basement. I will deal with him when I am done with dinner. He turned to the other bosses. He was covered in sweat, wine, and honey. He looked invincible. Does anyone else wish to test my appetite? He asked. The bosses shook their heads, pale. Min-jae turned to Clara. He dropped the knife. He collapsed into her arms. "You stayed," he whispered into her hair as the darkness took him. "You didn't run." "I'm the chef," Clara whispered back, holding his heavy weight. "I don't leave the kitchen until service is over." The purge that followed was legendary in the Seoul underworld. Min-jae didn't kill everyone. That was the old way. Instead, he systematically dismantled the corrupt branches of his own organization. He sold off the illegal gambling dens. He turned the drug routes into logistics for legitimate shipping. He was consolidating power, yes, but he was also cleaning house. He was building something that could exist in the light. Clara stayed for his recovery. It took 2 months. She cooked him porridge with ginseng and chicken. She made him bland foods again, slowly reintroducing spice as his stomach healed. They existed in a quiet bubble. The intimacy between them was palpable. They didn't sleep together. There was too much respect, too much unspoken weight for a casual tryst. It was something deeper, a bond forged in fire. But Clara knew it had to end. She stood on the balcony one evening, watching the Seoul skyline. The winter was turning into spring. Min-jae stepped out behind her. He looked healthier. The shadows under his eyes were gone. He moved with a grace that was no longer predatory, just assured. "You are packing," he said. It wasn't a question. "My visa is expiring," Clara lied. They both knew he could fix that with a phone call. "I can give you this city," Min-jae said. He stepped up beside her, leaning on the railing. "Restaurant, house, anything. Stay." Clara looked at him. "Min-jae, you are a king, but I am not a queen. I am a chef. I need to be in the heat. I need to yell at suppliers and burn my fingers and create. You can do that here." "Not here," she said, gesturing to the fortress. "This is your world. If I stay, I will always be the boss's woman. I will be the weakness they target, and I will lose myself in your shadow." She turned to him. She reached up and touched his face. The skin was warm. "You have your taste back," she said softly. "You don't need me to taste the world for you anymore." Min-jae closed his eyes, leaning into her touch. "I don't need you for the food, Clara. I need you because you are the only one who sees me. And that is why I have to go," she said, "so you can learn to see yourself." He didn't argue. He understood power, and he understood sacrifice. He knew that trapping her would destroy the very fire he loved in her. 1 year later. The restaurant was small, tucked away in a bustling alley in Itaewon. It was called Smoke and Honey. It was loud. Afro beats played over the speakers. The air smelled of suya spice and kimchi. It was a fusion that shouldn't work, but it did. It was the hottest ticket in town. Clara was on the pass, yelling orders. "Table 4 needs the Yolof! Where is my plantain?" She was in her element. She was tired, sweaty, and happy. The bell above the door chimed. The noise in the restaurant didn't stop, but a subtle hush rippled through the room. Clara looked up. Standing at the entrance was a man in a charcoal suit. He didn't have bodyguards. He didn't have an entourage. He was just a man. Min-jae walked to the counter. He looked at the menu written on the chalkboard. "Table for one?" Clara asked, wiping her hands on her apron. Her heart did that familiar flutter. "I hear the Yolof is good," Min-jae said, a small smile playing on his lips. "But I have a sensitive palate." Clara laughed. It was a bright, free sound. "I think we can accommodate you," she said. She pointed to a stool at the counter, right in front of her open kitchen. He sat down. He watched her cook. He didn't try to take her away. She didn't offer to leave. She placed a bowl in front of him, steaming, red, spicy. He picked up his spoon. He took a bite. He closed his eyes. He tasted the heat. He tasted the smoke. But mostly, he tasted the peace of a promise kept. "How is it?" Clara asked. Min-jae opened his eyes. They were clear. They were alive. "It tastes," he said, "like home." They smiled at each other across the pass, two survivors who had found their flavor in a world that tried to leave them numb. If this story moved you, hit the like button, and subscribe. Share this with someone who knows that the best meals are the ones that heal us. If you were Clara, would you have taken the empire? Or did she make the right choice by choosing her own kitchen? Do you believe food carries memories? Tell me your favorite comfort meal in the comments below.